What's up, everyone? In this video we're going to talk about BPC 157, which is a peptide that is responsible for increased rate of wound healing, I guess is the best way to put it. I've taken this before and I'm currently giving it to my mom, who fell and broke her sacrum not long ago, which is like your hip basically. It's like one of the bones in your pelvis region. Anyway, she fell, she broke it. She's been having a rough time recovering, started giving her BPC 157. She has noticed a notable difference in, I guess, her rate of recovery. So I'm stoked. I'm convinced that this stuff works. And we're going to talk about it right now because you have probably never heard of it. So BPC 157 is a peptide, which is basically like, it's a sequence of amino acids, right? Like growth hormone is also a peptide. Peptides, as far as I understand, are generally like very long chains of amino acids, as opposed to, I guess BCAAs, which are just like a couple, or I guess, are those just individual amino acids? I think they are just the individual ones. Anyway, peptides are like super long strains that in their special combinations, they do all kinds of like cool things. And they're kind of like, they're not new per se, but they are newer in the like underground gray market, performance enhancing drugs like SARMs, peptides, prohormones, things like that, that are kind of in this like gray area of you're allowed to buy them, you're allowed to sell them as long as they're not for human consumption, but you're not allowed to you can't like sell them as a supplement because they have not actually been studied. So you can't, well, they have like rat studies, but you can't actually say that like, oh, it promotes wound healing. So it can't be marketed in that way. The only thing you can do is like make these like roundabout articles and videos that say like, well, they showed on rats that it did this and maybe it does, but we don't know, don't sue me. Anyway, BPC 157 stands for body protecting compound. Like I said, I took this back in the day when I had more money than I knew what to do with, and I don't think I had a specific injury. I actually took it back in the day because I remember reading that it would increase the effects of phenibut, if I recall correctly. That's why I started taking it, because I started, well, not that I developed a tolerance. You always kind of develop a little bit of a tolerance, but I was like, man, I really wish, like, I don't know, I was just kind of experimenting with a lot of stuff back then, I guess, and I had so much money, relatively speaking. So I bought it, and the thing with most peptides, or all peptides as far as I understand, is that they need to be injected, right? So BPC 157 comes in this like little vial, and you have to, it's called reconstitute. So you have to mix it with this special type of water called bacteriostatic water, which as far as I understand is a type of water that has been, like, all the bacteria have been killed in that water or something like that. It's water with no bacteria. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there, but that's what bacteriostatic water is. The reason you need to use bacteriostatic water to mix with BPC 157 or any other peptide is because if you inject yourself with bacteria because you used like your tap water at home, you're gonna have a bad time probably. So anyway, I use this quite a bit. I don't remember if I actually used it for wound healing. I don't think I did. And I was taking like all kinds of stuff back then. So like, did it do something? Maybe, I don't know. But like I said, I have been giving it to my mom. She's been doing much better. But let's talk a little bit more about the science. So most of the studies have been done on rats. However, there have been some like promising results, I guess, from the BPC 157, and I believe that those results, combined with the anecdotal reports you hear on like bodybuilding forums, for example, mean that BPC 157 is worth trying. And in my experience, it's very mild. You don't really notice anything, I guess, and it's actually got a lot of really cool like benefits, at least from what it says here. That make it seem like if I had the money for it, I would consider taking it year round. For example, one of the cool things that happen is that it promotes tendon and ligament healing by tendon outgrowth, cell survival, and cell migration, as it was observed in a rodent model of Achilles tendon rupture, and when administered in the drinking water to rats with experimentally damaged medial collateral ligaments. So that is unique to peptides in that you can actually take it orally. as this one, I believe this one study like says they just like mixed it in their water and they noticed that the rats like healed faster. I think they, they'll like tear their Achilles tendon on purpose, and then they have two groups. You know how it works. Anyway, that's promising, I guess. Once you start doing injections, you realize that it's really not that big of a deal, and it's just a stigma that's associated with injecting things. And they're like, once you realize that like injecting, I don't want to say anything, you're not injecting it into your vein, to be clear. Like you're not shooting up. You inject it into your fat. Or with BPC 157, they say that you're supposed to do it like locally, wherever the problem area is. But I think that doing it in your belly fat, for example, is enough because it seems to have good systemic absorption. Anyway, super interesting, right? The next thing is that it has displayed direct tendon to bone healing so effective that they may actually, quote, successfully exchange the present reconstructive surgical methods, unquote. So that means basically that it is super effective at tendon to bone healing. What did they say? Like they might start doing that instead of surgery from now on, is what that means, I believe. So that's pretty darn good. Like if you have an injury and it's like a chronic injury, or injured your tendon or something like that, instead of jumping right into surgery, why don't you buy some BPC 157? And again, this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. Don't do anything that I say, but why not try something like this first instead of going and jumping into surgery that could potentially like have really bad things happen to you? Just saying. All right, the third thing is that it counters the damaging effects of NSAIDs on the gut lining so effectively that scientists call BPC 157, quote, an NSAID antidote, end quote. One of which they say that, quote, no other single agent has portrayed a similar array of effects, end quote. Which I'm assuming those are beneficial effects. I actually don't know too much about NSAIDs and why they're bad. Aren't they sold as like over-the-counter pain medication? Like isn't ibuprofen an NSAID? Is that bad for you? I've heard that before also, but I don't really know why. I actually don't know too much about that. Probably should have researched that. Okay, number 4, repair the damage that's done by inflammatory bowel disease within days of oral administration in microgram or nanogram doses in a rodent model of IBS. So like IBS, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they did this for the rodents. I don't know what they did to them to give them IBS, but I really don't know, because I think if you clean up your diet, you'll be okay. But this just goes to show that it's another like benefit to this compound that seems to be very good. And the benefit of peptides is because they're really just really long amino acid chains. You're really just injecting like a protein, if you think about it, right? It's just a combination of amino acids, and all protein, as far as I'm aware, is made up of amino acids, right? They're kind of like, amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So it's better, I guess you could say, than a drug, because depends on how you want to define it. But is a drug, if it's just a chain of amino acids, is it really a drug? You know what I mean? You understand? It's like, I don't know. You could make that argument. Okay. Oh, and another thing about this is that this was administered from like an oral pathway. They just like gave it to the rats to eat. So that's another benefit of this. It's like it seems to be well absorbed, which is not common with other peptides. All right. Number 5 is that it helps cure periodontitis. Periodontitis? I think that's periodontitis. When it is chronically administered in a rodent model of periodontitis, potently enough to have scientists conclude that, quote, BPC 157 may represent a new peptide candidate in the treatment of periodontal disease. So I'm pretty sure that periodontal disease is gum disease, which is where your teeth basically just start rotting out and your gums recede, I believe. So this is also good for your teeth, I guess. Anyway, the point about BPC 157 is that it seems to have like all of these like crazy beneficial effects on your overall health. You heal faster, it heals your gut lining, and like your gut just becomes better as a result. So it seems to be very promising not a doctor, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you're interested in this kind of thing, I don't know, it might be worth looking at. Number 6, it helps to reverse systemic corticosteroid impaired muscle healing in a rodent model where it was administered with a front load of 10 micrograms orally once daily for 14 days to rats with crushed gastrocnemius muscle. Similar benefits in a rodent study, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I actually saw an image of this. Like, it's just one image. Who knows if this is, you know, accurate, but you see the comparison between the two groups, and one of them just looks much better after, you know, doing the BPC 157 injections. So like, you know, can you base all of this, like, can you make a good judgment off of this from just looking at one picture of rat muscle cells zoomed in on, you know? Can you do that? Probably not just from that one piece of evidence. But when you take the entire aggregate for all of the other things that I mentioned earlier, plus the anecdotal reports of things you hear online, you know, you could make the argument that this is something that is worth exploring. It improves bone healing in rabbits who suffered an experimental segmental bone defect before being treated with BPC 157. So I don't really know what that is. Experimental segmental bone defect? I don't know, is that like a fancy way of saying they like broke their leg or something? I don't know, whatever. Basically, it helps you heal faster. It's not that complicated. Anyway, very interesting, don't you think? I think so. Now, one question that you might be asking is like, well, if this is so great, how come my doctor is not prescribing it? How come I have to buy it from some shady like website on the internet with Bitcoin? Well, the answer is that, like I said before, they're not approved for human consumption, and it's not patentable because this is like, it's a gastric juice peptide, right? So it's like, I'm not sure if that means it's a peptide that is found in your stomach, in your gastric juice, or is a byproduct of your gastric juice, or makes up your gastric juice, possibly. But you can't patent, like, you can't patent testosterone. You understand? You can't patent that. It's fucking testosterone. I guess you can patent testosterone, like derivatives, could patent those theoretically, but you can't patent a peptide. You can't patent growth hormone, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. Or I'm not really sure actually. But anyway, it says here that you can't patent this one. So that's one of the reasons there's not really much research on this, because normally companies that fund the research are ones that would stand to benefit from proving that it's actually good. So in this case, you know, what's the point of like funding research of this obscure thing that you have to buy online that's not even approved of human consumption, as opposed to researching garlic or creatine or rhodiola or like whatever, one of those more common things. Anyway, I think BPC 157 is super interesting. Like I said, I have been giving it to my mom for the past week or so, and she has said that she's noticed a noticeable improvement in her, I guess, rate of healing. Yeah, that's basically it. So do you have any questions about BPC 157? Do you have any questions about other peptides? Are peptides interesting to you? Would you like me to make more videos on other types of peptides? Let me know. Leave me a comment. Peace.